My ex-wife reached out to let me know that the guy she cheated with and left me for is treating her badly. I told her I don't give a damn, and now people are shaming me on social media. I am 31 now, and my ex-wife, who I'll call Lisa, is 35. We got married 10 years ago, just as I turned 21 and finished college. We were together for 5 years. For most of that time, I thought we were happy. I know I was. I've always worked in IT, and that hasn't changed. We rarely argued, and our sex life seemed pretty good. But a few months before I caught her cheating, she started to pull away. She used to be the one who would often initiate intimacy, but that suddenly changed. What was once a daily thing became weekly, and then in the last 2 weeks before I exposed her, it stopped entirely. I discovered her affair when she left her phone out one day, and it was still open to a nude selfie she'd sent to some number I didn't recognize. As devastated as I was, I kept my cool and snapped pictures of her phone with mine. I went through her messages and saw the whole conversation between her and the guy, a gym buddy I was unknowingly footing the bill for. I didn't confront her immediately because those texts told me everything I needed to know. They'd been hooking up in our bed while I was at work. I stayed quiet, and the next Saturday, when I knew she'd be out at her so-called double yoga class, which she claimed would take about 3 hours, I packed up my things, loaded the car, and left. I had already consulted with a divorce lawyer, so I knew I'd be okay. At 25, I wasn't swimming in money. Her father had left her around $200,000 when he passed, so she was well off, but I had no claim to that, nor did I want one. We didn't have kids, even though she'd always said we would start trying when she hit 30. That birthday came and went, but instead of starting a family with me, she chose to cheat. Even though I was the only one working, Lisa had a hefty amount of money in her own right and a college degree. She'd even taught school for a couple of years before we got married. I left the divorce papers on the kitchen table. Naturally, she blew up my phone later with all kinds of apologies, begging and pleading, but I ignored her. Her friends called too, leaving nasty messages about how I was a coward and never truly loved her otherwise. How could I just ghost her? I didn't respond to any of them. The only person I did call was the guy's wife, who dumped him on the spot. I guess it worked out for my ex, though, because she and her boyfriend got married just a few months after our divorce was finalized. The only time I saw her again was in court to finalize the divorce, where I didn't have to pay a dime in alimony. It was a clean break. She didn't look at me once, just kept her head down. She even brought her gym boyfriend with her, and he kept flexing, trying to look tough like he was ready to fight. I just shook my head at him, thinking, "You're getting exactly what you deserve." Since then, I've gone on a few dates and had sex a couple of times, but I haven't been in another long-term relationship. That's by choice. In many ways, I am still not over what happened. I don't love her anymore, but I've lost interest in falling in love again. I've reconnected with some friends I neglected during my marriage, mainly because my ex disapproved of me being friends with anyone. I used to be active on Facebook, but now I don't bother. Anyone I care about, I see or talk to directly, so I don't need it. Apparently, Lisa spun some story that I was mentally abusive, and that's why she had no choice but to leave me for her affair partner. My parents and close friends didn't buy it, though. She even tried to get me fired by selling that lie to my boss, probably as revenge for wrecking her boyfriend's marriage. It's ironic since it was his newfound single life that finally made an honest woman out of her. I just showed my boss the texts where she begged for mercy and forgiveness, admitting to the affair and acknowledging I was a good husband. He basically apologized and handed me 2 weeks of paid time off to heal. Fast forward 6 years, and I am still unmarried, working in the same area and for the same firm, but earning more. I have my own house, a fair amount of savings, a 401k, a car, and life is generally wonderful. I am content with where I am. I can do whatever I want, when I want, and I don't have to answer to anyone. Sure, I could buy a house if I wanted, but I'm content with where I am. Then, only last week, Lisa, my ex, began messaging me again. I never blocked her number because there was no real need. She hadn't tried to reach out since those desperate messages years ago, begging me not to go through with the divorce and telling me that her affair partner, who she's now married to, didn't mean anything to her, blah blah blah. Her initial messages were friendly. "Hey, it's Lisa. Long time no talk. How've you been? I know I messed up." Can we talk? Then she started calling me at least 10 times. I didn't pick up and I didn't reply to her texts either. Is this still your number? I talked to mutual friend and he said you're still using it since you replied to him. Please talk to me. Next, she started telling me how much she missed me and how I was the only man who ever treated her right. Then came the more personal stuff. Affair partner is such a jerk. He hurts me. I don't know what to do. Letting you go was the biggest mistake of my life. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. I still ignored her. Then she started listing the ways he's been hurting her. I don't ever want to be in touch with her again, so I texted our mutual friend, a guy who once called me a coward, but who I still keep in contact with because I know his family. I told him what Lisa said and asked him to reach out to the authorities if her claims were true because I don't give a damn about Lisa anymore. I wouldn't care if she starved in the street or died, but maybe her friends care. I actually used those exact words. Looking back, it's clear I do care, at least enough to send such a hateful message through someone else. But I didn't want to get directly involved. I also think Lisa is trying to manipulate the nice guy I used to be. The old me would be rushed to her rescue and been a shoulder to cry on. Not anymore. The mutual friend told me I was a terrible person and a monster, yada yada. I told him to go to hell and then blocked him. For the first time in ages, I logged into Facebook. As expected, not a single person I once considered a friend had reached out to comfort me or offer support when I was getting cheated on and divorced. I got a lot of support from my family and real friends, including coworkers who've become close outside of work. Now, Lisa S. friends have been sending me messages saying they were right to support her because I am abandoning her in her time of need. Like seriously, what the hell am I supposed to do? I am her ex-husband, the guy she cheated on. They know about the alleged abuse, so as her friends, what are they doing about it? I am just some guy she hurt a long time ago, but the abuse kept coming. So I screenshot all the texts she sent me recently, along with the ones from years ago. I've never changed my number, and I never delete anything, and decided to stop taking the high road on social media. I plastered all their feeds with her messages where she begged me to take her back and admitted to cheating. Finally, they left me alone. Now, she's still texting, complaining about what I said to the mutual friend, and accusing me of never loving her, calling me an evil person. I haven't responded to her. Honestly, I feel good about what I did, and in a twisted way, I feel like I've got closure. Lisa, if you're reading this, f*** off and mind your business. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I slept with another woman to get back at my cheating wife. People think I should feel guilty, but I honestly don't. I met the woman who would become my wife when we were both 15, around 10 years back. We started dating soon after, and everything between us was wonderful. We only ever had minor disagreements, nothing serious. But looking back now, I realized that I was the one who put in most of the effort from the beginning. Whether it was keeping the communication going, planning our dates, or even initiating sex, it was almost always me taking the lead. I'd be the one to suggest dates and plan them out, send the first text, and keep our conversations alive. Our sex life wasn't bad at all. We'd have sex several times a week, sometimes even multiple times in a single day. I was the one who was always eager to try new things, to experiment a bit with some kinkiness. But she was more reserved in that department. She enjoyed giving me oral, but she was never interested in receiving it herself, saying it felt dirty and gross. Financially, I was always the one bringing in more money and finding success in my career. She, on the other hand, preferred to focus on her hobbies and family, eventually slipping into a housewife role by choice. She even started working part-time, a decision she made on her own. This isn't to say she was a gold digger, far from it. I think deep down she just always felt like she had settled. Back then, I struggled with bad acne, got braces a bit later than most, and wasn't exactly in the best shape, but she never gave any hint that these things bothered her, so I was completely unaware. 5 years into our relationship and just a year after we got married, she met a guy at the gym. She claimed they were just friends at first. They'd work out together, enjoy talking to each other, chat online, and even grab dinner from time to time. I knew nothing about this new pal and never suspected anything. A few months into this, she told me she was going on a weekend trip with some friends. I even had to cover her share of the trip's expenses. She went away on a Friday, but returned the next day, explaining that she had a disagreement with the friend she was supposed to spend the weekend with. That entire day, she was distant, seemed depressed, and kept breaking down in tears. I was more worried about her than anything else and didn't suspect anything was wrong. But she finally gave in and admitted that she had cheated on me. For the first few minutes, I was completely numb. It took me some time to realize what she had said. When it finally dawned on me, I felt my legs giving out. I left the room, fell to my knees, and then I cried like a baby. She kept saying it wasn't tea on purpose and that it was a terrible mistake. She explained that she felt a powerful attraction and deep connection with him, which she couldn't resist. However, after spending the night with him, she claimed that she woke up realizing he didn't actually care about her, didn't love her, and was just using her. She also confessed that she didn't really care about him either, admitting it was just a short-lived crush. To add insult to injury, she confessed that she had done things with him like oral that she had always refused to do with me, as if having an affair wasn't already emasculating enough. From the day we met, I loved her deeply. I always took pride in the fact that our relationship had endured challenges that others couldn't survive. My family adored her, and my friends liked her too. People often told me how lucky I was. I bragged about having such an amazing girl who later became my wife. Throughout our time together, I showered her with love, surprised her with gifts, and constantly reminded her how much she meant to me. I did everything possible to put her first, including performing oral sex on her, even though she never reciprocated. Her happiness and pleasure were always my top priority. But soon after her confession, anger and despair took over. I was shouting at her, tears pouring down my face, desperately asking why she did it, how she could betray me so deeply, and whether she even still loved me. All she could muster was that she didn't know why, that she had been weak and swept away in the moment. She begged for forgiveness, pleading for another chance. In an effort to rebuild trust, she gave me complete transparency, immediately quit the gym, though it turned out to be unnecessary, as I later found out that the guy had also disappeared. She confessed everything to both my parents and her mother. Her father had passed away some time ago, and I did my best to move forward. We started marriage counseling soon after and also entered individual therapy. At times, I would lash out in anger, though never physically, only verbally. I called her names and said some terrible things. Most of the time, she took it without protest, but occasionally she would snap back, saying things like, "I'll take you for everything you are worth, or no other woman will ever love you." Both my parents and hers did their best to keep us together. Back then, I foolishly believed that my parents had my best interests at heart. They kept telling me that mistakes happen, that we could overcome this and grow as a couple, and that she still loved me despite everything. It took months for the anger and disgust to fade. I never loved her the way I did before, but I convinced myself that I had grown to love this new version of her, or at least I thought I did. She was committed to doing whatever it took to help us heal and make our marriage work. After one of her outbursts, she even signed a post-nuptial agreement that heavily favored me, giving up most of the support she would have been entitled to. She became more proactive in our relationship, and surprisingly, our sex life actually improved. However, I couldn't bring myself to give her oral anymore. The very thought of it disgusted me. We had been each other's first in nearly everything, and then she went and had unprotected sex with the other guy. Although she never complained, despite how much she used to enjoy it, she was now willing to do more things with me. She later confessed that my questions about whether I was so disgusting to her or why she was willing to do things with him that she hadn't with me really hurt her, and she wanted to make up for it. For a few years, we were genuinely happy. I started going to the gym regularly, and other issues I had, like acne, cleared up on their own. As time passed, I stopped checking up on her and no longer suspected any foul play. She stopped going out alone, and when she did, it was usually with mutual friends. Everything appeared to be going smoothly, or so I believed until around 6 months ago. After some changes at work, I got introduced to a new female coworker. We hit it off immediately, sharing mutual interests and getting along really well. We started exchanging messages, staying late at work to chat, and more. At that point, I had no intention of taking things in an inappropriate direction. I'm not sure why, but the relationship I had with this coworker resurfaced a lot of old resentment, distrust, and anger. I kept wondering why I could hold myself back and prevent things from escalating, but she couldn't. The fact that she seemed to face no real consequences for her actions, and that everyone who knew had so easily forgiven her, only fueled my resentment. I started checking up on her again. I went through her call logs and messages, and just as I suspected, I found exactly what I had dreaded. A series of calls with a guy I once considered one of my closest friends, all within the last week while I was at work. At first, I was furious and ready to throw her out of the house right then and there, but then I went completely cold. I realized I didn't care anymore, discovering this had killed any love or attachment I still had for her in an instant. The following day, I met with the coworker and started my own affair. It was as if a burden I hadn't even realized I was carrying was suddenly lifted from my shoulders. I felt better, lighter, and freer than I had in years. Shortly after, I reached out to a divorce lawyer. I was done, I just wanted out. I started staying out more, barely bothering to make excuses, and I avoided my wife as much as possible. There was no way she wouldn't notice, and I honestly didn't care. It took her a whole week to finally muster the courage to ask me what was going on. That S when I laid everything out. I told her I knew about the calls. I told her I knew she hadn't mentioned that she was secretly in contact with him. I told her I knew she was either having another affair or on the verge of one. And then, I told her about my own affair, sparing no details. As awful as it sounds, seeing her experience the same hurt, crushing her the way she had crushed me, was liberating. She broke down, wailing and crying, even throwing up in the living room. She screamed, then apologized, insisting that it wasn't like that. She swore she hadn't had an affair with him, that they were planning a surprise party for my upcoming birthday. Then she did something I didn't expect, especially after I had told her I wanted a divorce and admitted to my own affair. She begged me to stay, to try and work things out, and told me she loved me more than anyone. At that point, I just left and checked into a motel. I've completely cut off all contact with her and refused to acknowledge her existence. That was 2 weeks ago. Since her mother lives almost 500 miles away, she is now, of all people, staying with my parents. Friends, family, even my own parents have been bombarding me with messages, some begging me to contact her, others threatening and insulting me. They've told me she's suicidal, barely eating, and desperate to make things work, and they demand that I beg her for forgiveness for my transgressions. The only people I've spoken to directly are my parents, and I've since lost all respect for them. I found out that my mother had at least 3 affairs, all of which my father forgave her for. That might explain why my mother sided with my wife all those years ago. Now they are angry at me for hurting her, accusing me of not acting like a man should, running away from my responsibilities and causing my wife pain. My mother even told me she's taking care of her for me until I come to my senses, as if it's a given that I'll want her back, and she's some helpless creature that needs looking after. They, along with others, have backed up her story about why she contacted people in secret, including my former friend. I'm finding it hard to believe any of them, given that their reactions to her affair and mine are so completely different. On the bright side, she was wrong when she said no one else would want me. Since then, I've seen the other woman several times, and even had 2 casual hookups. Apparently, I am not as unattractive as she made me out to be. My wife had an affair almost 5 years ago with a guy she met at the gym, she confessed shortly after, and we tried to work through it. She did things with him that she had refused to do with me before, and that knowledge never really stopped hurting me. I thought I had moved past the anger and resentment, but recently discovered that I hadn't. Shortly after finding evidence of another affair, I started an affair of my own instead of confronting her. She and others claim she wasn't having an affair at all. Now everyone, including my own parents who once told me to forgive her and try again, are branding me as a terrible person and expecting me to get back with her and atone. My parents even took her in, apparently to keep her safe until I came to my senses. I don't want to and don't feel bad about this at all. If anything, it feels like we're finally even.